midst, as I mentioned earlier, of our Thanksgiving emphasis, and this is going to be the last message where I directly speak to this. I'm curious, how many of you are doing the booklet? Okay. The booklet, as I mentioned, emphasizes Be the One, where we acknowledge the blessings that we've received as that one leper who was healed came back to Jesus. And in the first week that I dealt with this, what I emphasized was, in Thanksgiving, we acknowledge that we're beneficiaries of the goodwill of God. God has worked through people. God has worked through nature. We're acknowledging that we're the beneficiaries of the goodness of God. Now, it's been demonstrated through some social tests and studies that have been done that people who do this actually experience an elevated sense of well-being. The control group was measured at one point, at the end of the study, no change. They didn't do the exercise. People who did the exercise, however, showed a measurable improvement in their sense of well-being by practicing Thanksgiving. So, the second week that I dealt with this, I spoke about the story of the invalid who was at the side of the pool. He'd been there for 38 years. If he was the first person in the pool, the thought was he would be healed. And Jesus came up to him, and this is a very pointed question that is, wow, this is a tough question. Jesus said to him, "Do you want to be well?" The implication being, maybe you're just content the way you are. Do you want to be well? That is a brutal question for us. Someone asked me how my diet was going. Was it Diane, you asked me how my diet was going? 4 or 5 weeks ago, Marcia was up in California, I decided I was going to lose weight. No more sugar. No more ice cream. No more potato chips. I lost 5, 6, 7 pounds. I was on fire. I thought she gets back in California. I am going to be a combination of Charles Atlas and Jack O'Malley. I am going to be buff. Well, she came back from California, which corresponded roughly to the time that we harvest the apples. And so what are you going to do with apples? You can't throw them out. That's not going to happen. So what do? You make apple breads. You make apple crisp. She makes delicious apple bread. She makes delicious apple crisp. You don't eat apple crisp without what on top?
Ice cream.
Ice cream, right. You just can't, you don't do that. And I have to close up my sister's cabin up in the woods. That meant I had to clean out her refrigerator. What do you think she left in her refrigerator?
Ice cream.
Ice cream, right. Do you think she bought cheap ice cream? No. She bought the $20 a quart ice cream. I thought to myself, I can't throw this out. No way. John, do you want to be well? Well, that's a tough question, isn't it? That's a real tough question. Do you really want to get there? Never mind the fact that I went down to Coolix and bought some potato chips and ice cream and all this. So that's a tough question from Jesus. It's really pointed. And the purpose of that is related to jobs. Do I really want to improve my sense of well-being or not? Next, we dealt with the issue that Jonah just mentioned. And that when we deal with Thanksgiving, we think of ourselves as the beneficiary of God's goodwill. The other issue is, do we contemplate how we have received by giving to others? Because Jesus taught that. Give life, then find life. Have we contemplated how I have given to others? And, sometimes we need a little fire under the rear end, and maybe I can do a little better at giving to other people. But, the real issue is I think a lot of us probably aren't even aware of how we have given to others. That's what I heard from Joan. That the exercise has prompted her to be aware of how she has contributed to the lives of others in ways that she may not even have been conscious of beforehand. So it's an exercise in awareness. How have I given to others? And can I give thanks to God that I've been able to do that? I looked through my booklet and also helping our son make a little more money. I paint for him. I don't get paid for it. I paid thousands of dollars for him. I didn't mention that once in this book. Not once. Can I say thank you, God, for what I've been able to do? What I've been able to give? So we're going to move on to two more considerations in this whole issue of thankfulness, and I call your attention to the readings today. You may want to open up your booklet and take a look at this. The story of Joseph, I think I referred to this a few weeks ago. The story of Joseph is very interesting because Joseph goes through immeasurable suffering. He is sold into slavery by his brothers, completely unfair and unjust. Then, to compound the problem, when he is a slave, he's a slave for Potiphar. Potiphar's wife has the hots for him. Potiphar's wife tries to seduce him, and Joseph says, no. Potiphar's wife then is what? She's a little perturbed by this. So Potiphar's wife then accuses Joseph of attacking her. Did he do it? No. More injustice. Joseph is thrown into prison. So here's a guy that's sold into slavery, betrayed by his very family, his brothers. Here's a guy that's accused of a crime that he did not do. As a matter of fact, he resisted that. What does that leave Joseph? It leaves him one angry, bitter soul. Life has not been fair to me. None of this is right. And then while he's in prison, he interprets the dream. I think it was of the baker. And he says to the baker, please remember me when you get out of prison. Does the baker remember him? No. So here's Joseph saying no to Potiphar's wife. Here's Joseph doing the baker a favor. He has enough goodness in his heart to do the baker a favor. He says, just please remember me. Okay, cut me a break. Does he remember? No. He stays in prison. So he has goodness coming out of him. In the midst of all this unfairness, wow, just compounds and compounds and compounds. So at the end of the story, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. Joseph rises to prominence. Joseph interprets the dreams of Pharaoh. He says to Pharaoh, look, we've got 7 good years here. We've got to store our crops because after the 7 good years, it's going to be 7 years of famine, and we need to have enough food to get through these 7 years. So Pharaoh does what Joseph tells him to do. Joseph and the Pharaoh and all the Egyptians have enough food because they saved food during the good years. Joseph's brothers, though clueless about all of this, they come to Pharaoh, therefore Joseph, to get food. Joseph recognizes that. Hey, that is a sweet moment, isn't it? It is sweet. Oh, yeah. You remember? Remember how you sold me into slavery? You remember how you ruined my life? Not only was I a slave, how many years of my life have I wasted because of you guys? Okay? Isn't that the deal? So what does Joseph do? Joseph forgives them. He gives them food. But notice this. I think this is very telling. Joseph doesn't say to them, oh, forget about it. No, Joseph says, you meant evil to me. I get that. You meant evil to me. This is not something in which the brothers did something by accident. Joseph becomes a slave. No. This is deliberate stuff. You meant evil to me. Yet he still forgives them. Still gives them food. Still takes care of them. Now what's our takeaway from this? Our takeaway from this is bad things happen. And Joseph could have stayed in that place of anger and bitterness, seeking revenge. You probably know people that are like this. You kind of walk around them as if you're on eggshells. Angry, bitter people. Life has been unfair. But Joseph doesn't stay in that place of anger and bitterness. Joseph can actually look at what happened to him and say, look, God has created good from all this. He does not say, God wanted you to sell me into slavery. God wanted me to be accused of attacking Potiphar's wife. God wanted me to be forgotten. He looks at it, I would suggest you, in a more of a bigger picture way. Yes, evil has happened, but I see the good that God has done. that God has created, can we then metaphorically use this as a way in which to look at our lives, the hurt and the pain that we've gone through, and look for the good that comes out of it? What good has God done through this? Or the alternative is we just stay bitter and angry. So here is a path, spiritual path to well-being. A spiritual path out of the anger and bitterness, which is justified. Out of the anger and bitterness to a place of gratitude for the good that I am seeing, despite the pain, despite the hurt, despite the evil. And I'm going to focus, as Joseph did, on the good. At the very least, it saves us from digging that hole of anger and getting deeper and deeper into that darkness. I'm going to look for the good that God has created. Now, the same issue is addressed by Paul in the second reading. Paul's got stuck with some kind of thorn in the flesh. We have no idea what it was. Maybe it was a seizure problem. Maybe it was a stammer when he spoke. We have no idea what this thorn in the flesh is, but we know this. Paul saw it as something from Satan. And Paul did not like it. Joseph didn't like slavery. Joseph didn't like being in prison. Joseph didn't like being forgotten. That was evil. Paul looks at this condition that he has and says, I want this gone. He prays about it. And in his prayer, you don't have to presume that this is, I would presume that this is a continual prayer. Does anything happen as a result of this? No. Lord, look at all that I've done for you. Look what I'm trying to do for you. Can't you cut me a break and get rid of this problem? And what does that create when the problem doesn't go away? I want nothing to do with God. Bitterness, anger, it's not fair. It wasn't fair to Joseph either. It's not fair, it's not right. But what is Paul's conclusion? Once again, here's a situation where we can dig that hole of anger and bitterness and anger and bitterness and anger and bitterness. But Paul doesn't do that. Paul looks at what he's stuck with, and he comes to this conclusion. He says, God is good, God's grace is sufficient. I am actually humbled by this issue that I've got. And it seats me more fully in my identity as a follower of Jesus. So, what happens to the bitterness? What happens to the anger? Well, let's let go. Just as Joseph let go of it. And what does Paul do? He looks for the good in the midst of the tragedy. So, here's the first issue. I have benefited from God's goodness. I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for the way I can give to others. And in those moments when things don't go right, can I be grateful for the good that I see? At a minimum, it saves us from the pitfalls of despair and anger. And that takes spiritual work. It takes spirit. Paul did not get there immediately. 3 times he prayed about this. You have to presume this took a long time, maybe months, maybe years. He prayed about this. It didn't go away. It took work to work through that disappointment at the very least, to the point where he could see the good. You know that Joseph had these issues simmering in him, and no doubt for a long time. So this is the spiritual work. Can I look at those negative things and actually find some good that comes out of it? So I'm grateful for what I have received from God. I'm grateful for what I can give. I am grateful even for the negative moments because of what I've learned or what I can see. The fourth issue, the fourth point, this is the fourth aspect of this whole concept of Thanksgiving. Now, Jesus said that I'm giving you a new teaching. You can't put the new teaching in an old form. You can't take wine, new wine, put it in an old wineskin, because the wine's going to ferment and expand, the old wineskin's going to break. So he's talking about a new perspective that he's bringing to people, a new teaching. We're going to look at this in a big context. So let us think about this for a moment. Usually, when we deal with Thanksgiving, it's between me and God. That makes sense. It's human nature. But if you remember the readings from the previous weeks, I'll refresh your memory. Paul wrote that when I'm in Christ, I rejoice with those who rejoice. I suffer with those who suffer. My inclination, I suggest this is human nature, is that when I hear that someone is rejoicing, what is my temptation? What happens when someone rejoices? How do we react to that?
You rejoice with them.
We rejoice with them. I'm not as good as you are. When someone's rejoicing, how do we typically respond?
Jealousy? Jealousy?
What?
Jealousy?
We're jealous.
Not me.
Oh, Betty just won the lottery. Isn't that terrific? Oh, yeah, that's terrific. I'm really happy for her. But I wouldn't want to be married to her husband. Oh, what a piece of work he is. Isn't that how it works? Oh, we're going out to Disneyland for a couple of days. Oh, yeah, we went down to Disneyland. It's great. How long are you staying? Oh, just a couple of days. Yeah, you generally enjoy it in a couple of days. You got to stay a week and a half. What do? We take away the joy of other people. Or we try to notch them down a couple of steps. I got a new job. Great, yeah. How much are you getting paid? Oh, yeah, I'm getting paid $15 an hour. Oh, that's nothing. We take it away in these subtle ways that we have to take it away. But Paul writes that when we're in Christ, we get that ego behind us. We get the competitive instincts within us behind us. We let go of that so that we can rejoice with those who rejoice. And when people suffer, we get the ego behind us and we suffer with those who suffer. What is the inclination? I'm not going to ask this time. What is the inclination? What is the inclination when someone suffers? I'll tell you what happens. Fred just had a car accident last night, wrecked his car. Oh, that's too bad. Yeah, I hope he didn't get hurt. No, he didn't get hurt. Yeah, but Fred drives like a maniac. You should see Fred drive. We don't suffer with Fred. We have these subtle ways of saying, you got what you deserve, Fred. You drive like a maniac. Subtle ways. So that's a way of keeping someone at a distance. You got what you deserve. But Paul writes, we get out of the ego. We rejoice with those who rejoice. We suffer with those who suffer. Let's take that to this booklet, this Thanksgiving booklet. Can I... Now, for those of you who think you want to pass this off or forget about it, this gets down to the nitty-gritty. Can I give thanks for the goodness that I see happening in the lives of the people around me? Can I get out of the me and God thing and have a bigger vision and rejoice for the goodness that happens to Lynn Stone and Bill Stone? Bill's in the hospital for 2 weeks. So do we put down the line? I'm grateful Bill Stone is doing better. Or is it all about just me and God? Can I have a bigger vision? Then rejoice for Lynn and Bill. It's hard for us to even think in those terms because it's usually just me and God. But let me have a bigger vision than that. And think about the goodness that happens in John's life, or Sue's life, or Sharon's life, or Chris's life. Can I have a bigger vision and rejoice for other people? So it's just not me. So it's interesting, if you've been doing this, look back over the last few weeks. How many times did you remember to give thanks for something in someone else's life? Wow, gee, I didn't even really think in those terms. That's why this exercise can be so profoundly important. It changes the way in which we look at the world around us. So there are 4 things here. What do I receive from God? Me and God. Okay. How have I given to others and I can be grateful for what I gave to others? Can I look at even some of the negative moments, even in your day, the negative moments from which, if you spent a lot of time hurrying, can I be grateful from that? Why would I be grateful for hurrying all the time? Because it impresses upon me, I gotta slow down. I'm taking away something good from it. Can I be grateful for the struggles from which I've wanted something? And the fourth thing, can I be grateful for the goodness that has come to other people? Can I have that vision, a bigger vision? If you have been doing the booklet, I hope that you'll consider it. If you've forgotten a few days, I haven't forgotten a few days, I hope you'll stick with it. It's a wonderful exercise that it'll put us in a good place. Who's going to speak next week? Is that person? I think Mark is. I think Mark is. I think so. Okay. Thank you for your attention this morning. In Christ's name.
Amen.